The Science of Being Well by Wallace D. Wattles. Welcome to this modernized reading of The Science of Being Well. What you're about to hear is a different kind of audiobook. I originally created this version as a personal study tool, a way to better understand and apply the teachings in my own life. When I first recorded these audios for myself, I skipped the sections that didn't resonate with me at the time. But once I decided to share them with others, I went back and made sure that nothing from the original text was left out. Everything is still here, simply reworded to help the meaning come through more clearly. If you happen to read the physical book alongside this audio, you'll see that the structure matches almost paragraph for paragraph. The only differences are the moments where I've added personal insights or connected Wattles' ideas to other teachings that have helped me understand them more deeply. In my experience, when I'm reading older books like these, I find that the original style does have a certain clarity and power that doesn't need adjusting. But there are times when the older language can make the message harder to take in. That's why I've taken a blended approach here. Most of the text has been gently modernized with simpler language, while certain passages are left exactly as Wattles wrote them. But rest assured, I haven't steered too far away from the original text. My intention isn't to replace or dilute the original voice, but to make the teachings easier to digest while staying faithful to the spirit and rhythm of his writing. As I mentioned, I've also added some of my own reflections, and occasionally I've connected certain points to ideas from other teachers or books, not to change Wattles' meaning, but to expand on it in ways that helped me personally. These additions are simply my interpretations. They may not reflect what the author originally intended, and they're not meant to. They're included because this version started as my own study practice. And one last thing before we begin. If you come across ideas in this book that seem to contradict things you've learned elsewhere, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to throw anything away. Just set it aside for now and allow Wattles' ideas to stand on their own. Later on, you can revisit what you already know and see how everything fits together for you. Use what resonates and forget about the rest. True freedom, after all, comes from releasing our attachments and aversions, including our rigid beliefs and fixed positions, especially around health, self-improvement, and spiritual ideas. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoy the journey. Let's begin. Preface. This book is the second in a series. The first was The Science of Getting Rich. That book is for those who want wealth. This one is for those who want health. It is meant to be a practical guide, not a philosophical essay. Its purpose is to teach you how to use the universal principle of life. I have tried to explain it as clearly and simply as possible so that anyone, even without prior study of New Thought or metaphysics, can follow it to perfect health. I have kept all the essential points and removed anything unnecessary. I have avoided technical, confusing, or difficult language, and I have kept the main goal in focus at all times. As the title says, this is about science, not speculation. The monistic view of the universe, the idea that matter, mind, consciousness, and life are all forms of one substance, is now widely accepted by thinkers. If you accept this idea, you cannot deny the logical conclusions you will find in this book. Best of all, the methods of thinking and acting I describe have been tested by me personally and by hundreds of others over 12 years with consistent success. I can say that the science of being well works. When its laws are followed, it cannot fail, just as geometry cannot fail. If the tissues of your body have not been so destroyed that continued life is impossible, you can get well. And if you will think and act in a certain way, you will get well. For those who want to understand the monistic view of the universe more deeply, I recommend reading Hegel and Emerson. You may also find insights in The Eternal News, a pamphlet by J. Brown, or in my articles in the Nautilus, 1909, titled What is Truth? If you want more detailed advice about voluntary functions like eating, drinking, breathing and sleeping, read my other booklets, New Science of Living and Healing, Letters to a Woman's Husband, and The Constructive Use of Foods. You may also look into the work of Horace Fletcher and Edward Hooker Dewey. Read all these, if you like, as a sort of fortification to your faith. But let me warn you against making the mistake of studying many conflicting theories and practicing at the same time parts of several different systems. For if you get well, it must be by giving your whole mind to the right way of thinking and living. Remember, the science of being well claims to be a complete and sufficient guide. Focus on the way of thinking and acting that it teaches. Follow it in every detail, and you will get well. If you are already healthy, you will stay healthy. Trusting that you will go on until the priceless blessing of perfect health is yours, I remain, very truly yours, Wallace D. Wattles. Chapter 1. The Principle of Health. In applying the science of being well, just like in applying the science of getting rich, there are certain basic truths that must be understood at the start and accepted without question. Some of these truths are: 1. Natural function equals health. When the body performs its functions naturally, this is health. Natural function happens when the principle of life, the source of life, acts freely and naturally. Number 2, there is a principle, a source of life in the universe. This is the one living substance from which everything is made. It flows through, fills, and connects all things, like a subtle, refined ether. All life comes from it, and its life is all the life there is. Number 3, humans are forms of this living substance. Each person has a principle of health within them. The word principle here means source. When this principle or source of health is fully active, all voluntary functions of the body, breathing, eating, moving, thinking, work perfectly. And number 4, the principle of health causes all real healing. It is the source of health which really works all healing, no matter what system or remedy is employed. And this source of health is brought into constructive activity by thinking in a certain way. Let me prove this last statement. We all know that people are healed by many very different, sometimes opposite methods. An allopath might give a strong counter-poison and cure a disease, while a homeopath gives a tiny dose of the poison most similar to that disease and also cures it. If allopathy ever cured any disease, it is a certainty that homeopathy never cured that disease, and if homeopathy ever cured an ailment, allopathy could not possibly cure that ailment. The two systems are radically opposite, in theory and in practice, and yet both cure most diseases. And even the remedies used by doctors in any one school are not the same. They might use different prescriptions for the same illness. Take indigestion, for example. Take it to 6 different doctors and compare their prescriptions. It is more than likely that none of the ingredients of any one of them will be in the others. Clearly, it is not the medicine itself that cures. It is the source of health within the person that does the healing. The same idea is seen with other methods. We find the same ailments cured by the osteopath with manipulation of the spine, by the faith healer with prayer, by the food scientist through diet, by the Christian scientist healing through creed statements, by the mental scientist with affirmations, and by the hygienist who heals with various plans for living. What does this show? There is a single source of health which is the same in all people and which really accomplishes all the cures, and that there is something in all the systems which, under favourable conditions, arouses this principle of health to action. This source really performs all healing, and medicines, manipulations, prayers, diets, affirmations, and hygienic practices cure whenever they cause the principle of health to become active, and fail whenever they do not cause it to become active. If they fail to activate it, they fail to heal. In other words, the results depend more on how the person thinks about the remedy than on the ingredients or methods itself. We can see this clearly in modern studies of the placebo effect. Dr. Joe Dispenza, in You Are the Placebo, tells stories that perfectly illustrate Wattles' ideas. For instance, Sam Lund, who believed he was dying of cancer, passed away even though the autopsy revealed no fatal disease. He died because everyone, including himself, believed he was dying. His thought deactivated the principle of health. On the other hand, Janice Sconfield, who suffered from long-term depression, recovered after taking what she believed was a powerful new drug, but the pills were placebos. Brain scans showed real physical change. Her prefrontal cortex awakened. Her belief alone reactivated the principle of health, reorganizing her biology. And in perhaps the most striking case, Mr. Wright's tumours disappeared after taking a supposed miracle drug, only to return and kill him once he discovered the drug was fake. His health rose and fell with his faith. There is an older story that illustrates this point. It is said that during the Middle Ages, the bones of a saint kept in a monastery were believed to perform miracles of healing. On certain days, large crowds of the sick would gather to touch the relics, and all who did so were reportedly healed. One evening, before one of these healing days, a thief broke into the monastery and stole the bones. The next morning, with a crowd of afflicted people waiting outside, the monks discovered that the relics were gone. Fearing that the loss would cause a scandal, they decided to keep it secret. Hoping to recover the stolen bones later, they hurried to the convent cellar, dug up the long-buried remains of a murderer, and placed those bones in the saint's case. They planned to let the crowds in and later give some excuse for why no miracles had occurred that day. But to their astonishment, when the people came in and touched the bones of a criminal, they were healed just as before. According to the story, one of the monks later wrote an account of the event, confessing that he had realized the healing power had never been in the saint's bones at all. It had always been in the faith of the people. Whether this story is true or not, its lesson applies to every healing system in existence. Each of the examples show that it is belief, the way one thinks, that awakens or silences the life principle. It is thought that opens or closes the channel through which the body's natural intelligence flows. The power that heals is in the patient themselves, and whether it shall become active or not does not depend upon the means used, physical or mental, but upon the way the patient thinks about those means. The principle of health does not require faith in a particular system or chemical. It only requires a mind that believes in wellness. There is a universal principle of life, just as Jesus taught, a great spiritual healing power that flows through all. Within every human being, there is a principle of health connected to that universal source. This inner principle can be either dormant or active, depending entirely on how one thinks. One can always quicken it into activity by thinking in a certain way. Your getting well does not depend on adopting any particular system or finding some special remedy. People with your identical illness have been healed through every possible method and treatment. It does not depend on climate. There are healthy and unhealthy people all over the world. It does not depend on your job or profession. People are well in all types of work, unless in the case of those who work in truly poisonous or destructive conditions. Your getting well depends upon your beginning to think and act in a certain way. The way a person thinks about things is shaped by what they believe about them. Thoughts are determined by beliefs, or more accurately, their faith that those beliefs are facts, and the results depend on personally applying that faith. If someone has faith in a certain medicine and truly applies that faith to themselves, that medicine will certainly cause them to be cured. But even great faith will not heal if it's not personally applied. Many sick people can believe in healing for others, but not for themselves. This same law applies to everything. If one believes in a diet and personally applies that belief, it will work. If one believes in prayer or affirmation and applies that faith to themselves, these will heal. Faith, when personally applied, cures. And no matter how great the faith or how persistent the thought, it will not cure without personal application. Therefore, the science of being well involves two fields: thought and action. It is not enough to merely think in a certain way. One must act in that certain way. He must apply his thought to himself, and he must express and externalize it in his outward life by acting in the same way he thinks. To be well, you must both think health and live health. Your inner and outer life must agree.